All right, awesome. It is 12:01. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning or good afternoon. Happy Friday. So happy to have y'all with us today. Welcome to the Texas 3-Year Assessment Pilot Coordinator Overview. Before we jump into today's content, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. But first thing I want y'all to know is that this training is specifically intended for our testing coordinators. Whether you're DTC or CTC, we welcome you guys here. If you do not serve in either of these roles, we actually encourage you to join our TTAP Educator Overview webinars that are starting, I believe, next week or the week after. And that talks more specifically about the design of the pilot, more about the schedules, score reports, what you can expect in test administration. Our coordinator overview today will focus more on the logistics as well as the organization of the pilot, the expectations of you guys as testing coordinators, as well as going through the resources that are available to you as well as your districts to make sure that you feel supported in supporting your teachers and that you're aware of all the resources that are available to y'all. So I see in the room with us, mostly this is y'all's first year, but we do have some TTAP veterans with us today as well. So we'll make sure that we try to go slow and steady as much as possible and try to provide as much context in these calls. But like I said, this is something that, we will be posting this webinar on our webpage, our TTAP participant webpage that we will show y'all. So if you happen to want to revisit some of this information, you're welcome to visit those slides as well as the recording on our page that will be posted, I believe, by next week. So lastly, because this is a mandatory webinar, it is imperative that you stay for the course of today's call. And at the very end of the call, you will have a very, very quick exit ticket where you will put in your email to verify your attendance with us. And this also gives us your email so that we're able to send you guys your 1 CPE hour certificate in your inbox by end of this week. And with that said, hello, you guys. I see the chat is a bunch of salutations in here, so good to see y'all. And someone already had a question about sign-in. The sign-in is basically through the exit ticket at the end of the day. And I would just go ahead and ask that we kind of keep the chat quiet today. I'm going to be mostly posting a bunch of resources while Emily is talking with us today. So that's where I want everyone to be able to see the resources that I'm posting. If you have any questions during today's call, you have the Q&A button available to you. Just feel free to throw in a question. We'll reserve a few minutes at the end for also any other questions that are unanswered through that Q&A feature. But that is where we ask that you place all your questions. Okay, and with that said, let's go ahead and do some intros on our end. My name is Jamie Kwan. I am the Director of Assessment Initiatives here at the Student Assessment Division. I manage all things TTAP, STAR Interims Assessments, as well as the Texas Theory Assessment. The Texas Formative Assessment Resource, or TFAR. So a bunch of stuff under my wheelhouse, but prior to coming to the agency, I served as a high school teacher in Dallas ISD, and also worked at the district administrative level for a charter school network out in Los Angeles before I came to the agency. Passing it on to Emily for a quick intro.
Hi, my name is Emily Winward. I am the program coordinator for TTAP. So I get to work exclusively on TTAP, which is something I love to do because I get to work with so many districts and teachers. And so we're just really excited to work with you guys again this school year, or work with our new districts for the first time. I also was a teacher before coming to TEA and worked at the elementary level in the Austin area and Liberty Hill ISD.
Great, awesome. So we have a good gauge of who's in the room with us today, but I also want y'all to get an idea of who is participating in the pilot with y'all this school year. So as you can see here, we have a really good representation for TTAP. We have all 20 regions finally participating with us. this year, and that's really exciting. And we as a TTAP team, we just want to welcome you guys to the third year of this pilot, and say that we're just so thankful to have you partner with us this year. As you can see, we had about 90 districts with us this year, and about 60,000 students that will be taking these 3-year assessments. So we thank you all for choosing to be a part of something that could have very large implications for Texas assessments down the line. So from piloting this new test design to providing feedback on our assessment literacy trainings that you guys will be that your teachers will be receiving during the year, as well as overall serving as a representative of the state and helping us determine what is best for Texas students. We just really thank y'all for your time this year. I know that there's a lot of expectations when it comes to the responsibilities that you guys will have to take on, but we hope that it is worthwhile and that you guys are able to just learn something new from this pilot experience. And with that said, let me go ahead and jump into our agenda. So first off, I'm just going to provide a little bit of context on the pilot. Again, we're not going into the design of the pilot, given that we've covered that in the recruitment season in the spring. But if you're still curious about all that stuff, you're welcome to access the educator overviews, like I mentioned. And then Emily will then go through participant responsibilities from testing coordinators, as well as any updates and supports that we have to share with y'all. So before I go into context, this is a quick video that we're about to show y'all that actually came from our first year of the pilot from the 22-23 school year. This comes from footage that we got from Spring and Midway ISD, because we do conduct site visits where whenever you guys invite us over to take a look at how things are going on the ground, we have the chance to talk with educators as well as our students here. So we'll let them speak to y'all real quick. Emily, I'm not sure if I hear the sound. Either because you're on mute or if the sharing function is not set up.
I think with TTAPs, you have more time to improve, and then when you do the star at the end of the year, it's like, I have one shot, I can't mess up on this.
Through the initiative, I think that you really have the opportunity to see what the impact of that teacher is throughout the year, and you can see how the student is responding to the instruction. It's not one and done. It really is an opportunity to see growth and development, which is what we really want to see in a classroom level of instruction.
Since it's a smaller test, it does help you narrow down where you're struggling in, so you're most likely to remember and set better goals for yourself instead of just saying, oh, I want to pass. It narrows down the opportunities so that you can ultimately actually grow.
Yeah, and you get time to improve and review over time.
Fatigue is such a big factor, and we see usually in the data with some kids, especially those kids who are probably going to land at the approaches level, they tend to struggle a little bit. They tend to tank towards the end of the test, and if the test is just going to be shorter, it really is going to take out that element.
It's a lot less stressful than the STAR test because they don't put as much pressure on you.
We have the opportunity to bring the stress level down that kids experience, since once a year STAR tests tend to get stress the entire system and students out.
It's not as overwhelming. It was like okay, I don't mind doing this compared to this huge thing of STAR. I feel like it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit it's not as overwhelming as it is normally on a year-to-year basis with STAR. And I think it makes you a better student.
Okay, so real quick, some pilot context here. So it was House Bill 3906, which was passed in 2019, that addresses several assessment components that we had to put into place. One of those things included having the Texas Education Agency pilot a through-year assessment that has the chance to potentially replace our current summative test or STAR down the line. Another thing that this assessment system is meant to do is to see if there's a way for us to pilot an assessment system that could inform more teaching decisions and improve instructional supports throughout the year. And with that bill in place, we were, next slide, please. With this bill in place, we were able to launch this optional small scale pilot in 22-23 school year, and it requires multiple years of piloting for us to assess its feasibility. So when we first sat down with stakeholders and said, hey, this thing was put into law, what are some benefits that you can see from a system like this? People said that one, it provides more timely and frequent feedback that can be used to help monitor overall student progress before they actually move on to the next grade in class. People also said that it's good for us to give multiple opportunities for students to show what they have learned rather than have everything hinge on one day's worth of performance at the end of the year. And stakeholders are also excited for the idea of in-year growth. This is not something that we report for other systems. So this is something that folks are really excited to see, especially students when they see themselves progressing from the fall, winter to the spring. On the other hand, this is still pretty relatively new and innovative work. There's only a handful of states that are really looking into a through-year model alongside us, but no state has actually tried to figure out how we can create a cumulative scoring model. So finding a way to factor in fall and winter's performance in having that contribute to the summative score if that benefits the students. So that's something that is brand new, and that in itself comes with a lot of technical questions that we have to answer around pilot design, the administration, and scoring. But overall, like, we want to make sure we're designing a test that is specific to the local Texas context and what our stakeholders value. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump to the timeline on the next page. Like I mentioned, it will take a few years before we have enough data to fully report to the state legislature about this system's feasibility to replace the STAR. Our goal here is to provide a progress monitoring system that gives students multiple opportunities to demonstrate their mastery of standards while also giving them the chance to contribute to their summative performance at the end of the year. So this timeline here, you can kind of see where we've gone and where we're going. In pilot year 1, we started with grade 5 science, grade 6 math, grade 7 math, and grade 8 social studies. In our second year, we piloted the same test titles and also provided an initial report to the legislature, which is posted publicly online if you're curious to see what we've learned so far. And then with pilot year 3, which is where we're at right now, we've taken out grade 5 science due to the science TEKS implementation. This is a bridge year, so that data would not be helpful for the context of our pilot. But we have added grade 3 math, which is our youngest kids in this span, as well as grade 8 math, which allows kids who did grade 8 math last year to see some longitudinal data from last year to this year. And with that said, as we look forward into year 4, which is not yet happening, we're looking into adding RLA and seeing how that plays out. And from there, we will be able to pull together a more comprehensive report to the legislature. And ideally, that is when they're able to say, hey, like, does this work as a replacement for the STAR or not? Like I said, I'm not going to go into detail about the design, but this is what I want to make sure y'all understand in terms of how this assessment fits in with your other assessments. So when you think about a balanced assessment system, on the right-hand side, you see a legend. You have formative assessments that teachers are administering throughout the year. Those are exit tickets, checks for understanding, but also unit and mid-unit assessments that are consistently administered over the course of the year to kind of check how students are doing standard by standard and whether or not they're reaching proficiency and mastery in those. There's also district benchmarks, which is inclusive of STAR interims or iReady or MAP. I think like a lot of districts have, you guys have your own decision-making processes on what y'all choose to adopt. And then lastly, there's summative assessments, which are STAR. So if you think about the current state of assessments, which is up here on the top part of this page. You have formative assessments, like I said, that are administered by teachers throughout the year. Districts have those locally adopted district benchmarks or interims, and then there are STAR assessments at the end of the year. What TTAP is hopefully going to do, and this is what we're testing, is figuring out how we can combine the use cases of interim and benchmarks with summative assessments and pulling it all into one cohesive system. So as you can see here, rather than having those separate systems separate, now we have a fall, winter, and spring tests. And that all ties into the data that students are able to see in terms of their growth and how they're progressing at a high level. And then STAR essentially would be replaced with this system here. So a quick look into our theory of action. So when we were first building this, we want to make sure we have a North Star. Whenever we created this assessment, we were like, hey, what are the features that we want to make sure we incorporate? And that includes one, the 100% TESOL-aligned, valid, and reliable assessment that replaces other assessment systems. All of our items that we pull into STAR are field tested as well as all reviewed by educators. So these are all items that are basically STAR quality so that we're getting the best data possible. Another feature is making sure that assessments are minimally disruptive to instructional time. We do make sure that these tests are as short as possible while still being able to have the possibility to make summative inferences from. So that is something that we keep top of mind at all times. Third feature is making sure that this is a progress monitoring system that provides timely data and information to potentially support instruction. And then lastly, with a cumulative scoring model, that's something that I said we'll need a lot of years to study this. This is why this pilot runs across 4 years. But we're trying to find ways to take into account student proficiency that is demonstrated throughout the school year. And with all that said, this is a new system. There's a lot of new information being thrown at y'all. So we want to make sure that the supports are there. So when it comes to trainings for teachers and administrators, you guys, we're making sure that campus admin as well as teachers are really on top of the best ways to interpret and use this TTAP data. And that kind of differs in terms of the data utility from fall, winter to spring. But overall, we hope that this results in the following actions. We hope to see, students understand their progress, track towards grade level proficiency, and have a greater ownership over their learning. From what we've heard from districts, even in the past year, students do get excited looking at their growth scores because they can tangibly see their progress. We also hope that teachers are analyzing TTAP data to identify students in need of intervention, so long as they're pairing that information with the formative data that they're gathering in their classroom. And then lastly, we hope that administrators are using TTAP data to better support campuses and teachers. Overall, this will hopefully lead to some positive short-term outcomes, which include administrators and teachers better understanding the relationship between instruction and assessments, which is why we put out, optional resources such as like learning what a balanced assessment system is. We do try to give more guidance on do's and don'ts on what to do with the data that's provided to you. And we do hope that students will have a better testing experience. And that's something that we do measure because we ask actually our kids at the end of every testing opportunity, they get an optional survey and they're able to tell us, hey, how did they feel during the test? What sort of level of effort they put in? How did they feel in terms of their preparedness? All of that data is being captured. And long-term, in terms of the outcomes here, we do hope that student proficiency in state academic standards will improve. That is one big question that we're continuing to ask ourselves as we collect the data over these 4 years, to just make sure that, if we do implement a system like this, this is genuinely better for our teachers and the school systems. And with that said, I'm going to pass it on now to Emily to talk about participant responsibilities.
All right, so we are going to jump right into responsibilities. Because TTAP is still in its pilot phase, there are some additional expectations, like Jamie mentioned, of participants to just make sure that things are running smoothly and that we're able to receive feedback on how we can improve the program year over year. So DTCs are responsible for overseeing several aspects of the pilot, including the ones that we have listed on the screen. So both assessment strategy and administration logistics, these are things that should be fully prepped and taken care of prior to the first testing opportunity, just to make sure things run smoothly for the school year. So those are kind of the basis for prepping for the pilot for the year. Next, we have training, tracking, and maintaining contact lists. These are more specific to TTAP, and they just help make sure that we are able to connect directly with participants and that they are all receiving relevant information and, again, able to provide that feedback on the pilot. And then last, we have serving as the teacher liaison. This is basically just communicating questions or concerns that participants have to our team. And that allows us to answer questions in a timely manner and just make sure that those all get answered. So we're going to break these down in the next few slides. So assessment strategy here, there are some guidelines laid out during the recruitment process and the confirmation process that DTCs need to make sure districts are following. One of these is that TTAP must replace benchmarks or interims for the titles that your district is participating in. And this is really just to minimize disruption to instructional time as much as possible. And then additionally, we do ask that participants adhere to the same general security procedures that we have in place for STAR. So these can be found in the DCCR, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, but we do also have the Test Administration Information Resource, or the TAI, and this is specific to TTAP. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that resource later as well. For administration logistics, TTAP is administered 3 times per year in the windows that we have listed below, and districts are expected to participate in all 3 of these testing opportunities. We have one in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. And then, as you can see, score reports are released the Monday after each testing window for all math assessments. And then for social studies, same thing for opportunities 1 and 2. Those will be released the Monday after the window. But for Op 3, because social studies does include a short constructed response on opportunity 3, those scores do take just a little bit longer and will be distributed following week by April 7th, that Monday. So DTCs also do have to register and roster students in TIDE and create test sessions for each opportunity. So if students are not rostered in TIDE, teachers are not able to see their students' results, which is a huge part of the pilot, is teachers getting to actually interact with that student data. So that is something that needs to be done before the first testing opportunity, and we actually ask that that is completed by the end of the month, so by October 31st. For test sessions, which are created in TDS, these can happen as early as 3 weeks before the testing opportunity. So again, the first window is starts November 11th. So 3 weeks prior to that date, you can start creating those test sessions. And then lastly, just making sure that students are provided with their test tickets. These can also be printed in TDS by testing coordinators, administrators, or technology staff. And if you do need a refresher or you're new to using TIDE, there is an overview module in the LMS that you can review. So training tracking, this is a big part of the pilot when it comes to the DTC role. Teachers and campus administrators are required to complete a beginning of year orientation, which will be similar in format to this one, but geared towards teachers and admin, and then a module around each testing opportunity. We do offer all of these trainings both synchronously through a live webinar like this one, or asynchronously, where we upload the module into the Learning Management System, or LMS. And then we do also administer our surveys at the end of those live training sessions. And this both helps us better understand how things are going at the district and campus level, and it helps us track who's completed those trainings. So even if a teacher decides to complete their training in the LMS, they'll still get a chance to complete those surveys. We'll send those through email, but we do always recommend the live sessions because it's just a little bit more detailed and gives teachers and admin a chance to ask questions that we're able to answer in real time. We have made some adjustments to our training requirements. This is based on some feedback we got from last school year. So teachers who previously have participated in the pilot, they will only be responsible for that beginning of your orientation and then the first opportunity training. So that is the only 2 required trainings, unless they had any modules from last year that they didn't complete. Those would need to be made up this school year. Another update is campus administrators. They will now have the same training requirements as new teachers. So as you can see, the 3 opportunity trainings and the beginning of your orientation. And this is just to make sure that there is leadership on each campus that can help support teachers when it comes to interpreting score reports and making instructional decisions using that data. And then lastly, teachers who don't teach a TTAP subject, but maybe will be serving as proctors, they do not have to complete any TTAP trainings. They are definitely welcome to, but it's not a requirement or something that we track. But they do need to be familiar with the TAI and the schedule of events. And we'll talk a little bit more about where you can find those things in a bit. And for the actual process of tracking trainings for DTCs, because DTCs do need to make sure that staff are completing those trainings, and we have 2 different methods that are offered to participants when it comes to trainings, we're going to break those down a little bit here. So in the LMS, if DTCs have the manager or admin access, you can generate a report called a learner transcript. And this allows you to see which staff have completed which modules so that you can get an idea of who is still missing certain required trainings. And there's some more information in the appendix of these slides that we'll share. So that is a good way to track the training completion in the LMS. And then for live trainings, teachers will receive certificates of completion for either training, whether they do it in the LMS or through a live webinar. They will receive those certificates, but instead of being able to access those through the LMS, they'll receive them by email if they complete a live training session. And because you are not able to access that learner transcript for live trainings, we do recommend maybe collecting those certificates of completion just to keep track of who has completed their live trainings. And then we do also send regular emails both to teachers and to DTCs with the names of staff who have not completed trainings. And Jamie, did you want to set this poll up? So this again is about training tracking and seeing how teachers have completed live trainings. Okay, so this was kind of a tricky one. This is talking specifically about live trainings. So if you are pulling those reports from the LMS, the learner transcripts, they are going to only show trainings that have been completed in the LMS. So if you are looking for information when it comes to live trainings, again, that's why we recommend having teachers share their certificates of completion with you. And then again, we will share updates to DTCs when it comes to their teachers and admin who are missing trainings. All right, moving on to contact lists. So contact lists are the main mode of training tracking that is used by our team. So DTCs have already heard from us regarding contact list links and have already uploaded contact information for your district. So we appreciate you guys getting that done. These are live links. So this means that DTCs can update or add or remove contacts as needed throughout the year, and changes will be reflected on our end. So these lists allow us to communicate again directly to participants and send the updates and reminders that we need to get out to everybody. So keeping these regular and updated helps. One, it keeps our training counts accurate, and it prevents teachers and DTCs from receiving unnecessary reminders. And we do ask or recommend that you bookmark these links for future use, just so that you can access them anytime that you need to make updates. And then within those contact lists, DTCs don't need to duplicate contacts or add duplicate contacts, even if staff are serving in multiple roles or teaching multiple grade levels or subjects. So in this case, DTCs would just want to select the highest designation or the highest role. And for the purposes of the pilot, that goes from DTC to campus admin to teacher to CTC to other, as you see in on the screen. And this is just kind of depends on the amount of communications that are received by each role. And so that's what we ask for the teachers or for participants for their role to be selected that way. For title, this is referring to the test title or like subject area. So if a teacher teaches a TTAP subject, they can just have their grade level and subject selected there. If they serve as a proctor or test administrator only, it can just be listed as other. And then any non-teacher roles really don't need a title selected. They can be left blank. And then lastly, this optional notes column is actually just for local district use only. So it's not something that should be used to communicate anything to us. It can be used for DTCs to make notes or reminders for themselves, but not something that we will be focusing on a lot on our end. And again, is completely optional. And then again, as we mentioned, there are several topics that require email reminders and announcements during the year. So you can see that campus admin receive a lot of information. This is like goes from administration, training, score reports, office hours, and surveys. And teachers and campus staff, they receive similar notifications, but they would not receive those office hours reminders. And we'll talk about office hours in a bit later on. And then district staff, they will be looped into newsletters and administration announcements. So as you can see, DTCs receive the most communications, and they're going to get emails that are sent to every other party. So that means that you'll always be looped into what is going on in the pilot and what is being communicated to other staff in your district. And then for, again, the teacher liaison role, DTCs can ask questions to the TTAP inbox on behalf of teachers or other staff. This is something that's monitored daily. And again, teachers can always send questions into the TTAP inbox or other staff, but we do recommend that they reach out to DTCs with questions first, and then DTCs can communicate those to us. We also still offer office hours for districts who need additional support, and that link can be found on the TTAP webpage for signups. And we do ask that DTCs schedule these office hours as needed. If there are other people in your district that have questions and would like to set up office hours with our team, we just ask that DTCs coordinate that and try to attend those meetings as well. All right, so our last topic on our agenda today, this is going to be about updates for this school year and supports that we're offering. In this first slide, I am actually going to pass back to Jamie.
Do you want to do the checks for understandings?
Oh, for our yes, let's go ahead and do that. All right, this first one regarding benchmarks. This is about a district that is participating in grade 8 social studies if they can administer MAP or iReady in grade 7 RLA. Okay, so for this one, the correct answer is that yes, this could be administered in grade 7 RLA, and that is because TTAP only asks or requires districts to not administer other benchmarks in the titles that they're participating in TTAP for. So if this district is only participating in grade 8 social studies, they're free to administer other benchmarks in other grades and in subjects. If they were participating in grade 8 social studies and wanting to administer benchmark in grade 8 social studies, that's where there would be a conflict. And then this one is regarding contact lists. So what should DTCs do if they need to add or remove a teacher from your contact list? All right, so this one would be, yes, accessing your district's link and making that update. You actually don't need to notify us of changes unless there's a change to maybe the DTC role, but otherwise you can just do that in your contact list and we'll be seeing those changes on our end. But always feel free to email us if you have questions about it. But easiest way to update that is just through that link. And then how many trainings are required for campus administrators?
And Emily, while they're answering this, can you quickly just elaborate more on who is a campus administrator and why are they responsible for these trainings?
Yes, so principals and assistant principals, we ask that they complete these trainings to, again, make sure that when it comes to score reports, that teachers have someone on their campus that they can go to for questions or that can lead PLCs when it comes to breaking down the score reports, interpreting what the results mean, looking into next steps. Previous years, campus admin were not required to complete all of these trainings. And some feedback that we got was just that, maybe admin needed to be a little bit more involved in that process when it came to training so that they understood better how these score reports worked and best ways to use them, best ways to interpret the results. So that is why we have made that adjustment. And that is, yes, all 4 training modules.
Let's go ahead and move along. I will go ahead and take the beginning of this next section around our updates and supports. So this is an update for this year where we need to tell y'all that testing times for OP1 and OP2 have actually increased. So if you take a look at the visual on the left-hand side, in year 1 and year 2, we have opportunities 1 and 2 that are shorter in length. So we have about 20 items, for example, in 6th grade, and then in OP3, it jumps up to 30 items. This year, each of the testing opportunities will be of the same length. So in this grade 6 example, I think it will be approximately 30 items per test. The reason for this is because we are a pilot, and things continue to evolve and improve based on the data that we are collecting year after year. So what we have learned very recently is the fact that when it comes for us to be able to create a cumulative score for students that brings in their performance from the fall and winter, we need to make sure that each of these tests actually meet a minimum threshold for testing reliability. And we have learned that this minimum threshold is approximately 30 items. And with that said, this is why our tests are now this length. And when it comes to actually establishing testing sessions, like all of these are local decisions in terms of how long you want to make these test sessions. All you need to know is there is technically no time limit in terms of a student completing a test, but they do need to complete it within one sitting. And we estimate these tests to be roughly like 80 to 120 minutes. The social studies tests typically tend to be quicker than the math tests. But yeah, when scheduling it, just make sure you're also considering and factoring time for setting up the test environment and administering the test instructions. But overall, to maximize that instructional time, we encourage districts to set aside no more than 2.5 hours for each testing session in the fall and in the winter. These tests tend to be quicker regardless because due to this full scope format, right? These kids are going to be interacting with some questions that they may not be familiar with, and as a result, they tend to move through those faster compared to the end of the year when you have full coverage of the curriculum by that point in time. So hopefully that is helpful. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. Next update here is around scale score. So this really only applies to you as a district if you participated with us in previous years, particularly last year, because last year and this year's data is comparable, not first year's data because we were still trying to set up the scale. There are some changes to be made, but last year's data and this year's data is comparable. However, we had to make an update on the reporting scale for particularly our math assessments. So if you're social studies, don't worry about it. But if you're math, just know that the scale score, the scale range has actually all moved up by 300 points to just make room for grade 3 math. As you know, these assessments, when it comes to math, there's a vertical scale here. And as a result of us adding in grade 3 math, everything had to shift up for us to make room for that. So what this basically means is if you are happening to want to compare student performance last year to this year, and you're pulling in that data, the opportunity levels, performance levels are going to remain the same. So if a kid in Op2 last year scored and approaches, if you look at that data again this year, or that one kid in their opportunity to performance last year, it still approaches. However, if a kid, for example, let's look at the grade 8 example, they scored 754 last year. If you were to re-pull that data last year and look at it this year, it will now be 1054. So basically what this means is if you want to just compare data last year to this year, just re-pull the file in CRS. All of the scales have already been adjusted, so you're able to make those comparisons last year to this year. That's a long-winded way of, if you want to make comparisons, download the CRS file or reach out to us if you have any further questions or need support in that area. And with that said, let's do a quick check for understanding here as well before we move on. Okay, real quick. So it should be very fast. Great, this one's easy. Yeah, when it comes to test sessions, so like trying to figure out for the entire classroom, how long are you keeping them? No more than 2.5 hours. But, if there's 1 or 2 students that need more time to test, you're welcome to relocate them and have them finish their test. Typically, there's not going to be that many students that will need that extra time. All right, great. Passing it back to Emily.
All right. So moving on into some supports that are offered for participants. We have training resources available to participants that actually include some supplemental video supports. So these are optional. They're kind of separate from the training requirements we talked about earlier. So we'll have 3 supplemental video supports based on feedback from last year. So these are just content specific short videos that will be posted in the LMS. And if participants want to watch those, they can access them at any time throughout the school year. And again, not a requirement, but they do provide a lot of support and help participants kind of better understand different aspects of the pilot. So they are designed to be super easy to navigate and let people skip around to sections of the video that are most relevant to them. And we will always notify participants whenever those are available in the LMS. The first supplemental that we have posted is the Balanced Assessment System supplemental. So this covers just what a balanced assessment system is and what that means, the different types of assessments and what data they provide, how to use that data, and then how TTAP fits into a balanced assessment system. So this video is actually already live in the LMS, and so it can be accessed at this time. The CRS, or Centralized Reporting System, this is where all TTAP student data is stored, and teachers do have to know how to navigate CRS to access those TTAP results from their students. So this supplemental is just basically a step-by-step guide that helps teachers or any users access the CRS and navigate it and download those student reports so that they can see, again, student results from each opportunity. And this last supplemental is the Range Performance Level Descriptor, or RPLD supplemental. This is brand new. So range performance level descriptors are a really powerful tool for teachers and educators to better understand how their students are understanding their content, how their learning is evolving, and how they can be pushed to kind of that next level of standards proficiency. So the descriptors in the resource itself break down a student's progression within each of the TEKs. So we're going to be rolling out a draft version of this tool this year for the first time, and it will pair with item level difficulty information that is provided in the ISRs for each student. So the supplemental training that corresponds with this, it's new this school year as well, and it's made to just help support participants in using the new resource. So it's going to include how to use these range PLDs, how to combine them with TTAP data, and how to use them to support student growth. So the TAI here, this is an administration resource that we mentioned earlier, and it provides information on the test administration itself. So instructions for preparing for the administration, during the administration, and then after. And there have been some updates that we've made this year that include some additional information on what students actually are seeing in the test environment. Some visuals that have been updated just to give administrators a better idea of what the kids are going to be seeing. We also have some instructions for test administrators and some guidance on prepping for assessment. And this resource is actually already available on the TTAP webpage, so you can access that now. For scoring resources, the data file layout here is something that explains what each component of the downloadable data file looks like in CRS. And there has been some updates to reflect changes to the student reports for this school year. It can also help with file ingestion by other online data platforms. So we will be notifying participants when this data file layout is posted to the webpage. And then some additional resources. These are optional, but These help guide participants through the process of interpreting score report data. So like last year, we're going to have some item sampler sets that are available, but will now include updated item difficulty labels that match the score reports and help kind of give an idea of the different levels of difficulty that items have on TTAP. Then we'll also have a facilitation guide that is meant to help participants with combining those TTAP results with their formative classroom data and provide some next steps. And then we have our FAQs. These are found on our webpage, and we do update these pretty frequently throughout the year with common questions that we receive. The schedule of events here on the left, this is something that has dates for training, test administration, score report availability, and we definitely recommend having this as a resource that is easily accessible to all participants throughout the pilot. And then lastly, here in the middle, we have our district participation list, and that includes each district that will be taking part in the pilot this school year. And all of the resources that we mentioned in this section either are already or will be posted to the participant webpage. This is something that we developed last year for DTCs, but have expanded this year to really be for all pilot participants, so teachers, admin as well, and it houses everything that teachers or participants in general will need to know about the pilot. So it can only be accessed through this link here, so we would recommend bookmarking it or saving it so that you can access it in the future, because this is where, again, it'll kind of be a one-stop shop for all of the resources that pilot participants are going to need. And our TTAP public webpage, this is a resource that is still available and is geared more towards non-participants, just the general public who wants to learn a bit more about the pilot. And then our last reminder here is just, as we said, all of our trainings will be offered synchronously and asynchronously. So for our upcoming educator overview, we do have 2 live sessions that are being offered. So those will be on the 17th and the 23rd. And the registration links, those were provided in our first kind of big launch emails that we sent out in early September, and also in the TTAP newsletter to teachers. So those can be accessed there, and teachers and admin can register for a live session. Then we also have the LMS version, which is the recorded module in the LMS that will be posted by this coming Monday, the 7th. And that does need to be completed by the 25th of October. So that can be accessed again starting next week. And you see the password here on the screen, but all of our TTAP trainings will use that same password in the LMS, and that is just TTAP-24-25. All right, and that brings us to our last slide. Jamie, if you want to add anything here.
Yeah, Emily, we just have that softball of a check for understanding that, but I don't know if you see it on your screen.
Oh, nope, I didn't, but now I do.
Yeah. But y'all know the answer to this. So I think we are good to go. Sometime before the first testing opportunity, the reason why we don't we try to set a hard date for the educator review is because we do provide trainings that tie with opportunities 1, 2, and 3 data. So we just don't want teachers to feel overwhelmed as they are doing trainings back to back. So that's why we established our cutoff. But with that said, here, as promised, is our link to our exit ticket for today. Emily can also throw that into the chat if you have a hard time accessing the code via your phone. But just wanted to say thank you guys so much for being here today and joining us for the 3rd year of TTAP. We are so excited to work with y'all this year. We are making ourselves as available as possible. So Emily can always be reached through that mailbox link because we want to make sure that y'all feel supported as TTAP participants.